The werewolf girl who hid in my woodshed for the winter. What hides in the deepest snow? A creature of shadow and ice, seeking refuge from a world that hunts it. Julian, a man accustomed to the quiet rhythm of the forest, found his winter solitude shattered by persistent scratching from his woodshed. Was it a lost animal desperate for warmth? Or something far older, far more alien, with eyes that held the echoes of a distant star and a fear that transcended the harsh earthly cold? He knew only that his life, and perhaps hers, would never be the same. The persistent scratching continued, a relentless counterpoint to the blizzard's howl. Julian pulled on his heavy parka, the familiar weighed a small comfort against the encroaching unknown. He grabbed his lantern, its beam cutting a wavering path through the swirling snow. Each step toward the woodshed crunched loudly, a stark intrusion on the winter's silence. The biting cold seeped through his layers, but a deeper chill, born of curiosity and apprehension, urged him forward. He reached the shed, the wind whipping at his face. He pushed open the door, a blast of icy air following him inside. The interior was a jumble of chopped logs, axes, and kindling, all coated in a fine layer of sawdust. Then he saw it. A small, hunched form, barely visible amidst a pile of split maple, trembled violently. It was curled impossibly tight, a mass of matted, grayish fur. Julian raised the lantern, its light washing over the creature. It flinched, a low, guttural growl rumbling in its throat, but it didn't move to attack. Two large, luminous yellow eyes, unlike anything he had ever seen, stared back at him, wide with primal fear. Its form was unmistakably wolf-like, but too small, too gaunt. He saw patches of what looked like torn, dark fabric clinging to its bony frame. Not an animal, not entirely. The realization settled heavy in his gut. A shudder passed through the creature, revealing its fragile state. Its ribs were stark beneath the thin fur, its breathing shallow. This wasn't a predator seeking shelter. This was something desperate. "Hey," Julian said, his voice softer than he intended, the words swallowed by the wind. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." He lowered the lantern slightly, trying to appear less threatening. The yellow eyes tracked his every move, unblinking. He saw a flicker of something ancient, something intelligent behind the raw fear. This creature was starving, freezing. He felt a pang of profound empathy. How long had it been out here? What kind of animal wore clothes, even torn ones? The question swirled, but the immediate need was clear. "You're in trouble," he murmured, more to himself than to the huddled form. Real trouble. He studied its eyes again, searching for any sign of aggression. There was none, only abject terror and exhaustion. The creature shivered, a deep, full-body tremor. Its alien eyes seemed to hold the echoes of a distant star, a vast, terrifying journey. He understood then that this was not merely a lost animal. This was a being completely out of place, profoundly vulnerable, and utterly alone. He backed slowly out of the shed, keeping his movements deliberate, non-threatening. The creature watched him until the door swung shut, not latching it fully. Julian hurried back to the cabin, his mind racing. He needed to think, but action came first. Warmth and sustenance. Inside, he moved with purpose, rummaging through his pantry. A chunk of smoked venison, some leftover venison stew from last night, a bowl of fresh water. He warmed the stew slightly on the stove, letting the rich, earthy scent waft through the small cabin. He poured the water into a sturdy metal bowl, then the stew into another. He added the venison chunk, deciding variety might be welcome. Just offering some help, he spoke aloud to the empty room, rehearsing his approach. He wanted to convey safety, not further alarm. He gathered the bowls, the heat from the stew a welcome warmth against his hands. Back at the woodshed, the blizzard raged unabated. He opened the door just wide enough to slide the bowls inside, placing them carefully on the clean dirt floor just inside the threshold, where the creature could see them but wouldn't feel cornered. He moved quickly, efficiently, then retreated, closing the door gently behind him. He didn't want to spook it further. He returned to the cabin, moving to the frosted window that overlooked the woodshed. He scraped a small patch clear with his thumb, peering through the glass, his breath fogging the pane. Minutes stretched, feeling like an eternity, punctuated only by the relentless wind. Then a faint sound, the soft scrape of wood. A grayish muzzle tentatively emerged, sniffing the air. The yellow eyes appeared, darting, assessing the silent offerings. Hunger won. The creature, still cautious, edged out, its movements stiff and slow. It sniffed the venison, then delicately lapped at the water, its small tongue working quickly. Julian watched, a strange, profound warmth spreading through him. He saw the way it trembled even as it ate, the desperate speed, the constant vigilance. This was not an animal that belonged in his woodshed. This was something lost, hunted, and profoundly vulnerable. A fierce, unexpected protectiveness bloomed in his chest. He would not let it suffer. Not here, not on his watch. He would protect this creature, whatever it was. Julian established a new routine. Each morning, before the sun crested the snow-laden peaks, he prepared a fresh meal. Warm broth, chunks of cooked meat, clean water. He placed them in the woodshed, retreating quickly to give the creature space. He repeated the process in the late afternoon. He never tried to make direct contact, just offered sustenance and a quiet presence. Days blurred into a week. The blizzard had subsided, leaving behind a pristine, silent world, but the cold remained relentless. Julian watched from his cabin window, a small clear patch his only view. He saw the creature, still gaunt but moving with slightly more strength. Its yellow eyes still held fear, yet a flicker of something else began to emerge, curiosity. It would sometimes pause, head cocked, listening to the cabin's faint sounds. He noticed it would often separate the meat from the broth, consuming the liquid first, then the solids, with an almost deliberate precision. This was not typical animal behavior. One afternoon he found a small, smooth stone placed beside the empty food bowls. It was just a simple gray rock, but it hadn't been there before. He picked it up, feeling its cool surface. A silent exchange, perhaps. His mind wrestled with the implications. The creature was acknowledging his help. It was thinking. Julian decided to try a different approach. That evening, as he delivered the food, he didn't retreat immediately. He knelt a few feet from the open shed door, placing the bowls down. He spoke softly, his voice low and even. "Hello there. My name is Julian." He paused, letting his words hang in the cold air. "It's a lonely life out here, but it's safe. No one bothers me." He saw the creature flinch, its ears swiveling. It remained in the shadows, unmoving. He waited, then slowly stood, backing away, closing the door gently. He returned to the cabin, a knot of anticipation in his stomach. The next morning the stone was gone. Instead, a small, intricate pattern had been scratched into the dirt near where the bowls had rested, a series of precise lines and curves that looked nothing like random claw marks. "You understand," Julian whispered to himself. A profound realization settled over him. This was not an animal. This was a being, intelligent and lost. His protectiveness deepened, shifting from instinct to a conscious commitment. That evening he carried the food in a small, solar-powered lantern to the woodshed. He opened the door, placing the bowls as usual. He then set the lantern on the ground, angled away, casting a soft, diffuse light into the shed's interior. He knelt again. "I'm going to tell you a story," he said, his voice gentle. "My grandfather built this cabin. He taught me to live off the land, to respect the forest. He said every living thing has a right to shelter." He continued, speaking of quiet days, the changing seasons, the comfort of firelight. He spoke of his own solitude, his love for the towering pines, the clarity of the winter air. He spoke for a long time, not expecting a reply, just offering a connection. The creature remained hidden, but he sensed its presence, a heightened stillness in the shed. He felt those yellow eyes on him, studying him. He finished, then stood, extinguished the lantern, and left. He repeated this for several nights. He would speak, sharing simple anecdotes, talking about the stars that glittered so coldly above the forest. He never pressed, never demanded. He simply offered his voice, a steady, calm presence. He began to notice the creature's breathing, less ragged, more even. He saw its form, less hunched, its back straighter. He even saw its tail, a thick gray brush occasionally twitching, a subtle sign of engagement. One cold evening, as he spoke of a particularly bright meteor shower he had witnessed years ago, a soft sound escaped the shadows. Not a growl, not a whimper, but something like a sigh, deep and weary. He paused his story, his heart quickening. "You're safe here," he said, his gaze fixed on the deepest part of the shed. "No one will harm you." A faint movement, a sliver of light from the lantern caught something. Not fur, skin. A slender, pale hand, fingers long and delicate, emerged from the shadows, reaching tentatively towards the empty bowls. It paused, hovering, then slowly, hesitantly, retreated back into the darkness. It was undeniably human. Julian's breath hitched. He had suspected, but seeing it was different. A surge of empathy washed over him, profound and immediate. This was not just a creature in distress. This was a person trapped, hiding. He understood the retreat, the shame, the fear of discovery. He felt a fierce wave of tenderness. "It's all right," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't need to hide from me, not anymore." He spoke more urgently now, his words filled with a quiet conviction. "The cold is getting worse. You can't stay out here. My cabin is warm. It has a fire, a bed. It's safe. I promise you." He could sense the creature's turmoil, a silent battle between ingrained terror and the desperate need for warmth and comfort. The air in the shed seemed to vibrate with unspoken conflict. He knew this was the moment. He had to offer more than food and stories. He had to offer true sanctuary. "Come inside," he urged, his voice unwavering. "You're not alone. I won't hurt you. I will protect you." He waited, holding his breath, the weight of his offer hanging heavy between them. He imagined the creature's internal struggle, the long journey, the fear. He thought of his own solitude, now offering a space for another. The thought warmed him more than any fire. He resolved to stand by his word, no matter what form she took, no matter what dangers she carried. He would bring her into his home and into his life. The woodshed door stood open, a silent invitation to a new beginning. A sudden fierce gust of wind ripped through the woodshed, slamming the door wider. The raw cold sliced through the small space, starkly contrasting with the faint glow from the cabin's window, a beacon of impossible warmth. Julian shivered, but he held his ground. He could feel the desperate tremble from the shadows. The pale hand reappeared, this time clutching the tattered remains of a cloak. It was a silent plea, a testament to her struggle against the brutal winter. "Please," Julian whispered, his voice resonating with an unshakable sincerity. "It's too cold to stay here. Come inside." A low, soft sound, almost a moan, escaped the darkness. Slowly, agonizingly, a figure began to coalesce from the deepest shadows. It was Genevieve. She was gaunt, her limbs unnaturally long, her movements jerky with fear and cold. Her eyes, luminous yellow, darted between Julian and the open cabin door. Patches of coarse, gray fur still clung to her skin, remnants of a desperate transformation, but her form was undeniably humanoid, slender and fragile. She took a single, hesitant step, then another, her bare feet crunching on the frozen earth. Julian did not move, did not even breathe loudly. He watched, his heart aching with a tenderness he hadn't known he possessed. Her gaze, filled with ancient terror, met his. He offered a small, reassuring smile. "You're safe," he repeated, his voice a balm against the storm's fury. She reached the threshold of the woodshed, pausing, her body rigid. The wind whipped her tattered clothes. Then, with a sudden, desperate lunge, she crossed the short distance to the cabin door. She moved like a wounded animal, but her urgency was human. Julian stepped aside, allowing her entry. The cabin's warmth hit her like a physical force. Genevieve stumbled, her eyes widening as they took in the flickering fire, the soft glow of the oil lamp, the scent of pine and wood smoke. Her shoulders, previously hunched, seemed to relax by degrees, though a deep tremor still ran through her. She stood frozen just inside the door, overwhelmed. Julian gently closed the door, sealing out the biting cold. "Here," he said, his voice soft, moving slowly to retrieve a thick wool blanket from a nearby chair. He didn't approach her directly, respecting her space. He laid the blanket on the floor near the hearth, then gestured towards it. "For you, warmth." Genevieve watched him, her head tilted, processing his actions. Her gaze lingered on the fire, a primal fascination in her yellow eyes. Slowly, she shuffled towards the blanket, her movements still wary. She sank down onto it, her long fingers clutching the soft wool as if it were the most precious thing she had ever touched. A faint sigh escaped her lips as the heat began to seep into her chilled body. Julian sat on the opposite side of the room, giving her ample space. He poured 2 mugs of steaming herbal tea, placing one on the small table between them. "It's just tea," he explained, though she likely wouldn't understand the words. "It will warm you." She watched him, her eyes tracking his every move. He saw a flicker of curiosity, slowly replacing the raw fear. Her gaze moved around the cabin, lingering on the books stacked on shelves, the simple wooden furniture, the tools hanging neatly on the wall. It was clear she had never seen anything like it. "Where do you come from?" Julian asked, knowing she wouldn't answer with words. He pointed to himself. "Julian," he pointed to her, "what's your name?" She flinched, then looked away. Her hand, still clutching the blanket, lifted slightly. She pointed a delicate, trembling finger towards the ceiling, then made a sweeping, upward motion, as if tracing an arc across an immense sky. Her face contorted with a sudden, profound sorrow and a flash of terror. She mimicked a sudden, violent jolt, her body swaying, then falling. She made a desperate, clawing motion with her hands, as if struggling to hold onto something. Julian watched, his brow furrowed in concentration. He saw the distress, the vivid imagery of flight and falling. He understood. She was from above, from the stars. She had fallen, crashed. He pointed to the sky again, then to her, from out there. She nodded vigorously, her yellow eyes wide and pleading, confirming his intuition. She then put her hand to her chest, a gesture of self, and made a soft, guttural sound, almost a whisper. It wasn't a word he knew, but the intonation was clear. It was a name. "Genevieve," he repeated, testing the sound. It felt right. She nodded again, a small, tentative smile touching her lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. He pointed to himself, Julian, then to her, "Genevieve." She mimicked his gestures, her voice a fragile echo, "Julian, Genevieve." A warmth spread through Julian, deeper than the cabin's fire. He was right. She was a person, a refugee. He saw the truth in her eyes, not a monster, but someone lost, someone hunted. The realization solidified his resolve. This was a shared secret, a trust he would honor with his life. He felt a fierce, primal urge to protect her, to shelter her from whatever had forced her from the sky. "You're safe here, Genevieve," he said, his voice firm, full of quiet conviction. He reached out slowly and gently placed his hand on the floor between them, an offering of connection. "I will protect you." Her eyes, still wary, met his. She studied his hand, then his face, searching for any hint of deception. Finding none, she slowly, tentatively extended her own hand, her fingers long and slender, and rested them lightly on his. The contact was brief, a feather-light touch, but it was a promise, a nascent bond forged in silence and shared vulnerability. Just then, a sharp, distorted crackle erupted from the old radio on his workbench. Julian frowned, pulling his hand away as he glanced at the static-filled receiver. It was unusual. He rarely heard anything but local weather reports. The signal was fleeting, a strange blend of high-pitched whine and rhythmic static, unlike any broadcast he knew. He reached for the tuning dial, but it vanished as quickly as it came, leaving only the soft hiss of white noise. He shrugged, dismissing it as a momentary atmospheric disturbance. He didn't realize it was a distant echo, a faint, chilling whisper from Veridian Prime, already beginning its journey across the stars. Julian turned back to Genevieve, his thoughts still on the brief radio anomaly. He offered a reassuring smile, but the moment of calm was shattered. The radio crackled again, louder this time, a persistent, grating static. It pulsed with an erratic rhythm, a sound that grated on Julian's nerves. Genevieve stiffened, her eyes wide, fixed on the old receiver. A low whine, distinct from the static, layered over the noise, rising in pitch. It was an alien sound, chilling and mechanical. Genevieve recoiled, pressing herself back against the wall, her earlier tentative trust replaced by raw fear. Her breath hitched. She looked at Julian, then back to the radio, her gaze darting, agitated. She made a soft, guttural sound, not a word, but a warning. Julian watched her, his own confusion giving way to alarm. Her fear was palpable, infectious. This wasn't just static. This was something she recognized, something dangerous. He moved quickly, silencing the radio with a flick of the switch. The abrupt quiet was heavy, filled with the echo of that alien whine. "What is it, Genevieve?" he asked, his voice low, urgent. He knelt before her, trying to meet her terrified gaze. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, her fingers tightening into fists. Her eyes flicked towards the window, then back to him, a desperate plea in their yellow depths. She pointed upwards towards the sky, then made a swift downward motion with her hand, a gesture of falling. From the sky, Julian murmured. He remembered her earlier gesture, the crash. He understood. This signal, this sound, it was connected to her arrival, and to whatever had forced her to fall. His protective instincts flared. He scanned the cabin, the sturdy logs, the thick glass. He felt a sudden, cold dread. Was she being hunted? Genevieve whimpered, a soft, mournful sound. She wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. Julian reached out slowly and placed a hand on her arm. Her skin was cool, even in the warmth of the cabin. "It's all right," he said, though he didn't believe it himself. "You're safe here." He pulled her gently towards him, offering comfort. She hesitated for a moment, then leaned into his side, seeking solace. Her small frame shook. He held her, feeling the rapid beat of her heart against his arm. He closed his eyes, trying to make sense of the new threat, the radio signal, her terror, the falling gesture. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. They weren't alone in knowing about Genevieve. Someone else was out there, and they were looking for her. Julian's mind raced. He had to think. He had to protect her. He rose, moving to the window, peering out into the deepening twilight. The snow continued to fall, a silent, swirling curtain. He saw nothing unusual, just the familiar outline of the trees, the faint glow of the moon behind the clouds. But the feeling of unease persisted, a cold knot in his stomach. Then a flicker, high above the distant tree line, a pinprick of light, not a star, too steady, too bright. It moved slowly, deliberately, tracing an arc across the sky. Julian stared, his breath catching in his throat. It was too high for a plane, too focused for a satellite, and it was moving with an unnatural precision. "Genevieve," he whispered, turning back to her. She was already at his side, her head tilted, her senses far keener than his. Her eyes were fixed on the same point in the sky. Her entire body tensed. She made another low growl, a warning this time, full of primal fear and a readiness to defend. The light pulsed once, then vanished, swallowed by the vast expanse of night. Julian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "What was that?" he asked, though he knew she couldn't answer with words. She shivered, her fur bristling slightly. She reached out, her hand finding his, gripping it tightly. Her touch was cold, but her grip was desperate, a silent plea for protection. He squeezed her hand in return, a promise. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't fight what was coming with just his bare hands. He needed to be prepared. He moved towards his workbench, his eyes scanning the tools, the hunting rifle leaning in the corner. He had always been a man of the forest, resourceful, self-reliant. Now those skills would be tested in a way he never imagined. He pulled a worn, leather-bound map from a drawer, spreading it across the workbench. It showed the layout of his property, the surrounding forest, the hidden trails he knew so well. Genevieve watched him, her gaze intelligent, absorbing his every movement. She seemed to understand the shift in his demeanor, the unspoken urgency. "We need to make this place safe," Julian said, more to himself than to her. He pointed to the cabin on the map. "This is our sanctuary." He looked at Genevieve, "But we need to be ready." She nodded slowly, her expression grim. She pointed to the forest on the map, then to herself, then made a series of quick, darting motions with her fingers. Julian watched, trying to interpret her gestures. She was indicating movement, stealth, using the cover of the trees, her abilities. A surge of warmth, mixed with a renewed sense of purpose, filled Julian. She wasn't just a frightened refugee. She was an ally, an intelligent, capable being, even in her fear. This wasn't just about him protecting her. It was about them protecting each other. He traced a finger along a game trail on the map, a path that led deep into the denser woods behind the cabin. "This way," he said, tapping the trail. "Good for hiding." He looked at her, a question in his eyes. Genevieve followed his finger, her gaze sharp. She nodded, a flicker of something like strategic understanding in her eyes. She pointed to a small, rocky outcropping near a frozen stream. Another good hiding spot concealed from above. She was thinking. She was planning. Their bond deepened in that moment, forged not just by shared vulnerability, but by shared purpose. The silent conversation across the map was more profound than any spoken words. They were two beings from different worlds, united against an unseen threat. Julian put the map away. He picked up his hunting rifle, checking the action, the safety. It felt heavy, cold, but reassuringly familiar in his hands. He knew how to use it. He knew how to protect. He glanced at Genevieve, who watched him with an intensity that spoke volumes. "We will be ready," he said, his voice firm, resolute. He met her gaze, a silent promise passing between them. The night outside grew darker, the silence broken only by the soft whisper of falling snow. But in the cabin, a new resolve had taken root. They would face whatever came together. Julian's breath plumed in the cold air as he watched the tree line. The pulsing light they had seen earlier was now a distinct descent, silent, unsettling. A dark mass settled beyond the ridge, camouflaged by the deep night and snow-laden pines. Footfalls crunched, not animal but deliberate, synchronized. The pursuers had landed. "They're here," Julian whispered, his grip tightening on his rifle. Genevieve stood beside him, her silhouette barely visible against the cabin's dark wall. Her head tilted, ears twitching, catching sounds Julian could only imagine. Her eyes, luminous even in the dimness, fixed on the approaching figures. She made a soft, guttural sound, a warning. Two figures emerged from the forest, cloaked in dark, form-fitting suits, carrying sleek, unfamiliar weapons. They moved with an unnerving efficiency, scanning the area. Julian knew he had to draw them away from the cabin, away from Genevieve's direct exposure. He took a deep breath. "Stay low," he mouthed to Genevieve, pointing towards the dense thicket to their left. Then, with a sudden, decisive movement, he sprinted right, crashing through a snowdrift, making as much noise as possible. The pursuers immediately turned, their weapons rising. "Freeze!" a voice boomed, sharp and metallic, speaking in a language Julian didn't understand, yet the intent was clear. Julian ignored it, weaving between trees, kicking up snow, drawing fire. Energy bolts sizzled past, melting snow, scorching bark. He was fast, agile, his years of hunting proving invaluable. He risked a glance back. Genevieve was gone, vanished into the shadows. Good. She moved like a whisper through the frozen undergrowth, her senses alive. The cold no longer bothered her. Her body was adapting, responding to the primal urgency. Her vision cut through the darkness, her hearing pinpointed the hum of the pursuers' equipment. She knew their ship was their vulnerability. It was a beacon. It was their way home. Julian led the two hunters on a frantic chase deeper into the woods, forcing them to split. One pursued him relentlessly, firing sporadic bursts. The other, seemingly more cautious, paused, scanning, trying to locate Genevieve. Genevieve circled wide, approaching the landing zone from a different direction. She saw the ship, a compact, angular craft, partially hidden by snow-covered firs. A third figure, an engineer perhaps, was already at its side, checking readouts. Genevieve moved with silent speed, a blur of motion in the periphery of the engineer's vision. She launched herself not at the person but at the ship's exposed underbelly, where cables and ports hummed with alien energy. Her claws, sharper now, tore through protective casings, ripping vital lines. Sparks flew. The hum died. She dislodged a critical power conduit, then darted back into the shadows before the engineer could fully react, leaving behind a snarling, fleeting impression. The ship's lights flickered, then dimmed. An alarm blared, thin and distant. Back in the forest, Julian ducked behind a massive oak. The hunter was close, too close. Julian heard the heavy breathing, the crunch of snow. He waited, rifle raised, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The hunter rounded the tree, weapon up. Julian swung his rifle butt not to strike but to deflect the hunter's aim, sending the energy weapon skittering into the snow. The hunter, taken by surprise, stumbled. Julian moved quickly, using his body weight to pin the hunter against the tree, disarming them completely. "Stay down," he growled in English, knowing it wouldn't be understood, but the tone conveyed the message. He pressed the cold barrel of his rifle against the hunter's helmet. Meanwhile, Genevieve confronted the second hunter who had turned back towards the now dark ship, alerted by the alarm. The hunter saw her, a flash of something primal and powerful, eyes glowing, teeth bared in a silent snarl. The hunter raised their weapon, but Genevieve was faster. She moved like a shadow, a blur of fur and motion, knocking the weapon from their grasp with a powerful swipe of her paw. It flew into a snowdrift, harmless. She stood over the disarmed hunter, her enhanced form radiating a potent protective aura. Her growl was low, vibrating with controlled power, a clear warning. The engineer from the ship rushed over, seeing the disabled craft and the disarmed pursuers. Panic flickered across their face, visible even through the helmet visor. Julian emerged from the trees, rifle still aimed, joining Genevieve. The pursuers were trapped, their ship crippled, their weapons lost. "Your ship is going nowhere," Julian stated, his voice calm, resolute. He gestured to the damaged vessel. "Leave. Do not return." Genevieve let out another low growl, a promise of further resistance should they hesitate. The three aliens exchanged quick, frantic words in their own tongue. They looked from Julian to Genevieve, then to their damaged ship. They understood. With a final, frustrated glance, the disarmed hunters and the engineer began to retreat, heading away from the cabin, deeper into the vast, unforgiving forest. They would have to find another way off this world. Their immediate threat was gone, for now. Julian watched them go until their retreating figures vanished into the gloom. He lowered his rifle, the tension slowly draining from his body. He looked at Genevieve. She was still in her partially shifted form, muscles taut, fur bristling slightly. Her eyes met his, filled with a raw, fierce triumph but also a profound relief. He reached out slowly, offering his hand. She leaned into his touch, her fur soft against his palm. He felt the warmth radiating from her, a comfort that went beyond the physical. "We did it," he whispered, a smile breaking across his face. "We did it, Genevieve." She shifted back, her human form emerging though her movements retained a fluid grace. Her hand, still slightly clawed, clasped his firmly. A shared breath, a silent understanding. The fear was replaced by a quiet, profound joy. They had faced the unknown together and prevailed. The cabin, once a solitary refuge, now felt like a shared sanctuary, a testament to their unexpected alliance. The snowy woods, once a harsh wilderness, now held the promise of a new beginning. They had found not just survival but a bond forged in fire and ice, a love that transcended worlds. For now, in the quiet aftermath of their victory, they had peace. And that was enough. They would build their life here together in their quiet corner of the universe. The future, though uncertain, was theirs to face as one. The days that followed settled into a rhythm Julian cherished. He taught Genevieve to brew coffee, the rich aroma filling their small cabin each morning. She mimicked his movements, her brow furrowed in concentration, a faint smile touching her lips when the task was done. He watched her learn, her alien mind adapting with astonishing speed, finding joy in simple earthly pleasures. Genevieve, in turn, showed him how her senses perceived the world. She pointed out changes in the snow Julian had missed, the subtle shift in wind direction that signaled distant movement. Their communication deepened, a blend of spoken words, gestures, and an almost telepathic understanding that blossomed between them. "You like this?" Julian asked one afternoon, handing her a freshly baked oat cake. He had been experimenting with recipes. Genevieve took a delicate bite, her yellow eyes widening slightly. A soft purr resonated in her chest, a sound he had come to recognize as contentment. She nodded vigorously, a small crumb clinging to her chin. Julian chuckled, gently wiping it away with his thumb. The intimacy of the gesture was natural, unforced. "Sweet," she murmured, a new word she had learned, her voice still a little rough but growing clearer. Julian watched her, a warmth spreading through him. He had found something extraordinary, something he never knew he needed in the quiet depths of the forest. The memory of the alien hunters still lingered, a faint shadow on their peace, but their immediate triumph had given them confidence. Yet the question of the stranded aliens persisted. They were out there somewhere in the vast wilderness. He knew they could not simply disappear. One evening, as the last light faded, Julian found Genevieve staring out the window, her gaze fixed on the distant tree line. Her human form was still, but a subtle tension in her shoulders caught his attention. "What is it?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. She turned to him, her eyes holding a familiar, distant apprehension. "They are still here," she stated, her voice low, "not close, but searching." Julian frowned. "Searching for what?" "Their ship is ruined." Genevieve gestured vaguely towards the forest. "Something else, something valuable to them." He considered this. The invaders had landed with a specific purpose. Disabling their ship had stopped their immediate pursuit, but not their original mission. "Do you know what it is?" She shook her head slowly. "No, only that it is important. They do not give up easily." Julian felt a familiar prickle of concern. He had hoped their departure meant true peace, but Genevieve's intuition was rarely wrong. He had to assume the aliens, though disarmed, were resourceful. He could not afford to be complacent. He needed to know what they were after. Their sanctuary depended on it. The next morning, Julian decided to scout the perimeter. He told Genevieve his plan, sketching his route on a scrap of paper. "I will be careful," he promised, nodding her worried expression. "Just a quick sweep, away from where their ship landed. See if there are any signs of them." Genevieve nodded, her concern palpable. "Be safe," she whispered, her hand briefly touching his arm, a reassuring warmth. He grabbed his rifle, though he preferred to avoid confrontation. He moved silently through the snow-laden woods, his senses sharp, scanning for any disturbance. The forest was quiet, save for the crunch of his boots and the occasional call of a raven. He followed a ridge line, keeping a wide berth from the landing zone, circling back towards the cabin. He was nearly 2 kilometers from their home when he found it, a small, roughly constructed shelter, hidden beneath a thick overhang of pine boughs. It was crude but clearly artificial. Someone was living there. He crept closer, rifle raised, peering through the gaps in the branches. Inside, he saw remnants of a small fire and discarded rations, unlike anything he had ever seen. The air still held a faint, acrid scent. Then he spotted a glint of metal near the shelter's entrance. He moved carefully, his heart thudding, and picked it up. It was a communication device, small and intricate, far beyond any human technology. It had been scavenged from their damaged ship, no doubt. The device hummed faintly in his hand, a soft, rhythmic pulse. He recognized the specific energy signature Genevieve had warned him about before. He carefully placed the device in his pack, his mind racing. They were not just surviving, they were attempting to re-establish contact. This changed everything. It meant they were still a threat, a persistent, intelligent one, and if they could communicate, they could summon more. Julian hurried back to the cabin, the snow no longer a comforting blanket but a silent, watchful enemy. Genevieve met him at the door, her eyes immediately scanning his face. She sensed his changed demeanor. "You found something," she stated, not a question. He nodded, pulling out the communication device. Its subtle pulse was more pronounced now, almost urgent. Genevieve recoiled slightly, her fur bristling. "This is theirs," Julian explained, holding it up. "They're trying to contact someone, or something." Genevieve took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the device. "They will try again," she said, her voice firm, resolute. We must understand what they seek before they find it. Julian looked at the device, then at Genevieve. Their peace was indeed fragile, but their alliance was stronger than ever. They had faced one wave of pursuers and they would face another. He knew, looking into her determined eyes, that whatever came next they would face it together. Their bond, forged in fire and ice, was their greatest strength, a quiet promise in the heart of the vast, silent woods. Julian held the alien communication device. Its subtle pulse grew stronger now in the cabin's warmth. Genevieve watched it, her ears twitching, a low growl rumbling in her chest. "What do we do with it?" Julian asked, his gaze fixed on the intricate metal. "Destroy it." Genevieve shook her head. "No, not yet. It is a key." She extended a clawed finger, tracing a symbol etched onto the device's surface. "This is a beacon. It sends a message, but it also receives. They are not just calling out, they are listening." Julian considered this. "So, if we destroy it, we lose our chance to learn anything." He placed the device on the sturdy wooden table. "Can you tell me more about it? About what they might be looking for?" Genevieve sat opposite him, her golden eyes intense. "My people, we call them the Kaelin. They are collectors. They seek ancient relics, powerful artifacts from vanished civilizations. Viridian Prime holds many such secrets." Her voice was quiet, filled with a distant weariness. "Perhaps they believe I carry something, or know where something is hidden." "Did you?" Julian asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "A fragment, a date, a crystal. It was given to me for safekeeping. It holds knowledge, not power, but to the Kaelin, knowledge is power. I hid it before I reached your woodshed, buried deep." Julian felt a jolt. This was the core of the mystery. Where? A place only I would know. A specific rock formation near a stream that flows from the glacial melt. It is well hidden. She looked at him, her vulnerability clear. If they find it, they will stop at nothing to extract its information. It is why they pursue me across the stars. "Then we retrieve it first," Julian stated, his resolve hardening. "We can't let them get it." Genevieve nodded slowly. "It is dangerous. They will be searching. They know the general area where I landed." "And we know their general area too," Julian replied, a plan forming. "They are weakened, stranded. We have the advantage of knowing this land. We use that." He picked up the communication device again. "What if we use this against them? Can we intercept their signals, or even mimic them?" Genevieve's ears perked up. Her tail gave a slight thump against the floor. "It is possible, if we can understand their frequency, their coding. But it requires delicate manipulation and extreme caution. Any interference could alert them to our presence directly." Julian spent the next few hours examining the alien device. He was no electronics expert, but his experience with intricate clockwork and rifle mechanisms gave him a knack for understanding complex systems. He carefully opened a small panel, revealing a network of luminous filaments and tiny, crystalline components. Genevieve watched over his shoulder, occasionally pointing with a claw. "This section," she indicated, "controls the short-range broadcast. It is relatively simple. The long-range is much more complex, beyond our immediate ability to decipher." "So, local communication," Julian murmured. "They're probably trying to coordinate amongst themselves, or send a distress signal to a nearby Kaelin scout, if one exists." He carefully connected a small, shielded wire from his old radio to the alien device, hopping to tap into its energy field without triggering an alarm. A faint, almost imperceptible static began to emit from his radio. He adjusted the frequency dial slowly, searching. After what felt like an eternity, a series of sharp, rhythmic clicks and whistles broke through the static. Genevieve tensed, her eyes narrowed. "That is their internal communication," she whispered. "Basic commands. Search patterns. They are spreading out." "They're looking for you," Julian concluded, his voice grim. "And the crystal." He felt a surge of protectiveness. "We need to get to that crystal before they do." The next morning the forest was cloaked in a fresh layer of snow, crisp and silent. Julian packed supplies, food, water, his rifle, and a compact shovel. Genevieve, in her more human-like form, wore a thick jacket Julian had adapted for her, the hood pulled low to conceal her ears. Her senses were heightened, her movements fluid and silent. "Stay close," Julian instructed as they stepped out. The cold air bit at their faces. Genevieve simply nodded, her hand brushing his arm briefly, a silent reassurance. Their journey was swift and deliberate. Genevieve led the way, navigating the dense woods with an innate understanding of the terrain, her eyes constantly scanning for tracks, for any sign of Kaelan activity. Julian followed, rifle ready, his human senses straining to match her acute awareness. They found tracks eventually, distinct from any local wildlife. 3 sets, heading in various directions but all converging roughly towards the glacial stream Genevieve had described. The Kaelan were organized, systematic. "They are covering ground," Genevieve observed, pointing to a set of tracks veering off towards a ridge. "They are thorough." Julian looked at the sun, already past its zenith. "We don't have much time." As they neared the stream, a sudden shift in the wind brought a faint, metallic tang. Genevieve froze, her head snapping up. "They are close," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Very close, 2 of them." Julian immediately dropped to a crouch, pulling Genevieve down with him behind a cluster of snow-laden evergreens. He peered through the branches, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. In the distance, near the stream bank, he saw 2 figures. They were smaller than he remembered, clad in dark, form-fitting suits, moving with an eerie, almost robotic precision. One held a device that pulsed with a soft, green light, scanning the ground. "They have a scanner," Genevieve whispered, her body rigid beside him, "for energy signatures. They are looking for the crystal's residual energy." Julian gripped his rifle. They were too exposed here. They needed to circle around, approach from a different angle, but time was running out. The green light swept closer to the specific rock formation Genevieve had described, the one where the crystal was hidden. "They are almost there," Genevieve said, her voice tight with urgency. "We must act now." Julian looked at her, then back at the Kaelan. He couldn't risk a direct confrontation here, not with the crystal so close to being discovered. He had to create a distraction. "I'll draw them away," Julian decided, his voice low and firm. "You go for the crystal, be fast." Genevieve's eyes met his, a flicker of concern, then determination. "Be careful," she urged. He nodded, then began to move, quietly at first, circling wide. He aimed for a patch of dense brush further down the stream, planning to snap a branch, make a noise, anything to divert their attention. Every step was deliberate, every breath controlled. He felt Genevieve's presence vanish silently behind him, a phantom in the snow. Julian reached his chosen spot. He took a deep breath, then with a sudden, powerful movement, he snapped a thick, dead branch. The crack echoed sharply through the quiet forest. The 2 Kaelan figures instantly stiffened, their heads turning in unison towards the sound. The green light from their scanner paused. They exchanged a series of clicks and whistles, their internal communication. One began to advance cautiously towards Julian's position, while the other remained near the stream, its scanner still sweeping the ground but with renewed intensity. Julian had their attention, but not entirely. He watched as the Kaelan near the stream continued its search, seemingly prioritizing the crystal. Genevieve needed more time. Julian knew he had to push it. He broke cover, running openly for a few strides, making himself visible for a fleeting moment before ducking behind a thick spruce. The Kaelan immediately gave chase, their movements surprisingly agile over the snow. Julian led them deeper into the forest, away from the stream, away from Genevieve. He could hear their quick, light footsteps behind him, the clicks of their communication growing more agitated. He knew he was bait, and he had to be convincing. Meanwhile, Genevieve moved with unparalleled swiftness. The moment Julian created his diversion, she flowed through the snow, a blur of gray and white. Her heightened senses pinpointed the exact location of the buried crystal. The Kaelan near the stream was distracted, but its scanner was still active, sweeping closer and closer. She had seconds. She plunged her hand into the frozen earth, claws tearing through the packed snow and icy soil. The cold barely registered. Her fingers brushed against something smooth, crystalline. She grasped it, pulling it free just as the green light from the Kaelin's scanner washed over the exact spot where it had been hidden. A silent, internal triumph. The crystal was hers. She clutched the small, glowing shard in her hand, its faint warmth a stark contrast to the biting cold. Now she had to find Julian. She heard the sounds of pursuit and evasion growing more distant, drawing the Kaelin further into the wilderness. Her heart throbbed, a mix of urgency and fierce protectiveness for the human who risked everything for her. She moved swiftly, circling to intercept, to ensure his safe return. Genevieve felt Julian's presence like a distant, urgent pulse through the forest. The Kaelin were fast, but Julian was cunning. He ducked and weaved through the dense, snow-laden pines, using the uneven terrain to his advantage. She could hear the Kaelin's frustrated clicks, their pursuit becoming more desperate as Julian maintained his lead. He wasn't just running, he was herding them, guiding them further from the cabin, further from any chance they had of finding her or the crystal. Her heart swelled with a fierce pride. He was magnificent. Julian scrambled over a fallen log, his boots finding purchase on the icy bark. He risked a glance back. The Kaelin were closer now, their gray forms stark against the white snow. One raised a hand, making a sharp, guttural sound that echoed through the silence. Julian knew they were coordinating, trying to flank him. He had to change his strategy. Instead of leading them in a straight line, he cut sharply to the left, plunging into a thicket of young firs. The branches scratched at his face, but the cover was worth it. He heard the Kaelin hesitate, their movements momentarily disrupted by the change in terrain. He moved quickly through the undergrowth, his breath misting in the frigid air. He could feel the strain in his legs, the burning in his lungs, but the thought of Genevieve, safe with the crystal, pushed him onward. He was buying her time, securing their future. That was all that mattered. Suddenly, a shadow detached itself from the deeper woods ahead. Genevieve. She moved like a whisper, her eyes locking onto his. There was a raw intensity in her gaze, a silent question about his well-being. He gave a quick, reassuring nod, a small smile touching his lips despite his exhaustion. "They're close," he gasped, slowing his pace as she merged with him. Genevieve took his arm, her grip firm, offering silent strength. "We outran them," she murmured, her voice a low rumble. "For now." She held up the crystal, its faint light almost invisible in the dim forest. "It is safe." A wave of relief washed over Julian. "Good," he said, pulling her closer for a brief, tight embrace. "Let's get back to the cabin. We need to see what's on this." They moved together, Genevieve setting a swift but steady pace, Julian matching her stride. They circled wide, creating a false trail before heading directly for their sanctuary. The Kaelin's agitated communications faded into the distance, a testament to Julian's successful diversion. The forest became quiet once more, save for the crunch of their boots on the snow. Back inside the cabin, the warmth was a welcome comfort. Julian stoked the fire, its flames dancing, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Genevieve sat at the table, placing the crystal carefully before her. She ran a hand over its smooth surface, her brow furrowed in concentration. "How do we access it?" Julian asked, pouring them both a mug of hot cider. He handed one to her. Genevieve took a sip, her eyes still fixed on the crystal. "It requires a specific interface. My ship had one. This beacon might be adapted." She gestured towards the Kaelin communication device they had retrieved earlier. "It is Kaelin tech. It might possess the necessary protocols." Julian moved the beacon onto the table, its dark casing a stark contrast to the crystal's subtle glow. "So, we're using their own tools against them," he mused. "Clever." Genevieve nodded, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns on the beacon. The Kaelin value data above all else. This crystal holds significant information, enough to draw them across star systems. "What kind of information?" Julian asked, leaning forward, intrigued. Is it about your home world or something else? Both, she replied, her voice tinged with a solemnity that made Julian pause. Veridian Prime's history, its scientific advancements, its vulnerabilities, and details of the Kaelin's true intentions. She carefully opened a small panel on the beacon, revealing a series of ports and emitters. With delicate precision, she inserted the data crystal into a slot. A soft, internal thrumming began, barely audible, and the crystal pulsed with a brighter, steadier light. Julian watched, fascinated, as a faint, holographic projection shimmered into existence above the crystal. It was a swirling nebula of data, symbols, and images. It is starting to decrypt, Genevieve explained, her voice hushed. This will take time. The Kaelin encryption is complex. What do you think we'll find? Julian asked, his gaze fixed on the evolving projection. Genevieve looked at him, her yellow eyes holding a depth of ancient knowledge and fresh worry. Truths they wish to keep hidden. Reasons for their expansion. Weaknesses we can exploit. A grim determination settled on her features, and perhaps a way to protect this world from them. Julian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Her skin was warm, vibrant. We'll face it together, he promised. Whatever it is. She squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation. The bond between them, forged in fear and trust, now deepened with a shared purpose that stretched beyond their personal survival. They were no longer just two individuals. They were allies, protectors of a fragile secret, preparing for a future they could only dimly perceive. The holographic projection above the crystal continued to resolve, fragments of images and text slowly becoming clearer. Julian saw glimpses of alien starships, detailed schematics, and maps of distant star systems. One image, a stylized emblem, caught his attention. It was a symbol of a coiled serpent, its head crowned with an elaborate, almost regal circlet. He pointed to it. What's that? Genevieve followed his gaze, her expression hardening. The emblem of the Kaelin High Command. It signifies their highest authority, their most ruthless strategists. She shivered despite the cabin's warmth. They are not simple scavengers. They are conquerors. Julian felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Conquerors, here, on Earth. Not yet, Genevieve corrected, her voice firm. But their methods involve assimilation. They seek worlds rich in resources, rich in unique biological diversity, worlds like this one. The gravity of her words settled heavily between them. Julian looked around his simple, beloved cabin, then out the window towards the pristine, unsuspecting forest. The peace he cherished, the quiet life he had built, was suddenly vulnerable, exposed to an interstellar ambition he couldn't have imagined. So this crystal holds their playbook, Julian said, his jaw tightening. Their plans, their weaknesses. Precisely, Genevieve confirmed. And our best chance at defending ourselves and perhaps your planet. She watched the data stream across the holographic display, her mind racing to process the torrent of alien information. The Kaelin operate through infiltration and manipulation before outright invasion. They identify key resources, destabilize local governments, then move in. Local governments, Julian repeated, a wry smile touching his lips. They won't find much of that in my woodshed. Genevieve almost smiled back, a rare, soft expression. No, but they will find unique flora and fauna, rare mineral deposits, and a nascent, developing civilization ripe for guidance. Her gaze met his. Your world possesses immense biological wealth. It is a prize. The implications were staggering. Julian had thought they were just hunting Genevieve. Now it was clear the Kaelin had a far grander, more sinister objective. He looked at the glowing crystal, then back at Genevieve. This changes everything. We can't just hide anymore. We have to understand this, stop them. We will, Genevieve said, her voice resolute. But it requires careful study. We must learn their language, their strategies, their vulnerabilities before they learn ours. She paused, her gaze distant as if seeing beyond the cabin walls, beyond Earth itself. The data crystal holds their entire operational history for the last 3 cycles. It is a treasure trove of intelligence. Julian leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. The world he knew, the universe he thought he understood, had suddenly expanded in terrifying ways. But looking at Genevieve, at her unwavering resolve, her intelligent eyes, he felt a surge of strength. They were in this together, and with this crystal they had a fighting chance. "All right," Julian said, a determined glint in his eyes. "Let's get to work. We have a lot to learn." He reached for a notepad and pencil, ready to decipher whatever alien script and diagrams Genevieve could translate. The cabin, once a simple sanctuary, had transformed into a command center, a quiet bastion against an impending interstellar storm. The warmth of the fire, the scent of pine, and the steady hum of the Kalen beacon filled the air, a strange blend of home and alien intrigue. Genevieve began to point at specific data points on the holographic display, her voice calm and focused, explaining the Kalen linguistic patterns and tactical designations. Julian listened intently, his mind already forming questions, devising strategies. Their alliance, born of necessity, now held the potential to alter the fate of an entire planet. The immediate threat of the Kalen pursuers receded, replaced by the daunting, yet exhilarating, challenge of understanding and ultimately defeating a galactic empire. Their connection deepened further, a silent promise of unwavering support against the vastness of the unknown. The crystal glowed, a beacon of hope and a map to their future. Genevieve pointed at specific data points on the holographic display, her voice calm and focused, explaining the Kalen linguistic patterns and tactical designations. Julian listened intently, his mind already forming questions, devising strategies. Their alliance, born of necessity, now held the potential to alter the fate of an entire planet. The immediate threat of the Kalen pursuers receded, replaced by the daunting, yet exhilarating, challenge of understanding and ultimately defeating a galactic empire. Their connection deepened further, a silent promise of unwavering support against the vastness of the unknown. The crystal glowed, a beacon of hope and a map to their future. They worked for days, the cabin air thick with the scent of pine and the faint, almost musical Kalen script. Genevieve meticulously translated, her fingers tracing the shimmering holograms, explaining the nuances of Kalen command structure and resource allocation. Julian filled countless notepads with diagrams and notes, his mind racing to grasp the alien logic. He focused on recurring symbols, trying to discern patterns in their military formations and logistical chains. "Their language is precise," Genevieve explained, pointing to a sequence of glowing symbols. Each glyph carries multiple meanings depending on context. This, for example, denotes acquisition, but also assimilation when paired with a planetary designation. Julian scribbled, "Assimilation equals conquest." "Got it." He looked at her, a furrow in his brow. "What's their primary motivation? Just raw power?" Genevieve shook her head. "No. The Kalen are driven by resource scarcity on their home world, Xyloxis. They seek specific rare elements, not just territory. Earth possesses an abundance of a unique crystalline structure, designated Solara Prime in their records, which is critical for their hyperjump drives." A cold dread seeped into Julian. Solara Prime, that sounds like our glacial quartz. The Kalen aren't just here to conquer, they're here to strip the planet. The implications were terrifying. They wouldn't just rule, they would consume. They discovered the Kalen Empire operated with chilling efficiency. Their command structure was a tight, hierarchical network, with all major fleet movements and resource acquisitions coordinated through a central nexus point. The crystals showed a constant stream of encrypted data bursts originating from this core. This centralization, Genevieve explained, was both their strength and their potential weakness. "If we could disrupt that nexus," Julian mused, tapping his pencil on a diagram of Kalen fleet movements, "or even just intercept its primary communications." Genevieve nodded slowly. "Precisely. The crystal contains fragments of their encryption keys, but gaining full access would require immense processing power and a direct link, or a much deeper understanding of their quantum entanglement protocols. As they delved deeper, a specific name began to emerge with disturbing frequency: Commandant Cathar. His operational history within the data crystal painted a picture of a brilliant, ruthless tactician, responsible for the subjugation of several systems, including Veridian Prime. His strategies, while brutal, showed a predictable pattern of flanking maneuvers and resource denial. "He's the one who destroyed my world," Genevieve said, her voice tight, eyes fixed on a holographic battle map detailing the fall of Veridian Prime. Julian placed a hand gently on her arm. He saw the pain, the unresolved grief, but also a flicker of fierce determination. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was personal for her. "Then we learn everything we can about him," Julian stated, his voice firm. "His weaknesses, his habits, every single detail." They discovered Cathar had a distinct preference for direct assaults, often underestimating the resilience of indigenous populations once their primary resources were secured. The data also indicated a peculiar reliance on a specific type of Kaolin energy conduit, a unique power source distinct from the Solara Prime crystals. These conduits were essential for Cathar's personal flagship, the Ravager. Julian realized the scale of the problem was immense. Two people in a remote cabin could not defeat an empire, but they now had intelligence, a specific target, and a potential vulnerability. The Kaolin were not invincible, just overwhelming. "We need to find a way to exploit this centralized command," Genevieve stated, pulling up a schematic of the Kaolin nexus, and Commandant Cathar's reliance on his unique energy conduits. "If we can disrupt either, it could throw their entire invasion plan into chaos." Julian looked at the complex data, then back at Genevieve. Her mind was a formidable weapon, processing alien logic with astonishing speed. His own pragmatic resourcefulness felt like a small but vital counterpoint. They were an unlikely pair, a human and an alien, united by a shared threat and a growing, unspoken affection. "The conduits," Julian said, his mind already working. "They must be manufactured or sourced from somewhere specific. If we can understand their supply chain, we might find a way to cut it." Genevieve's eyes gleamed with a new light. "That is a sound strategy. The crystal has fragmented data on Kaolin manufacturing hubs. It will take time to piece together, but it is a path." The cabin, bathed in the soft, alien glow of the crystal, felt less like a sanctuary and more like a forge. They weren't just learning, they were forging a weapon piece by painstaking piece. The vastness of the Kaolin threat remained, but the path forward, though narrow, had become visible. They had identified the enemy's heart and a potential way to sever its arteries. Their next step was clear: find the source of Cathar's power and dismantle it from within. They had a fighting chance, and that, Julian realized, was enough. Genevieve spent days immersed in the glowing crystal, her fingers flying across the holographic projections. Julian worked beside her, his mind absorbing the Kaolin language as it translated, piecing together fragments of their history and technology. The crystal revealed a vast, ruthless empire, but also a meticulous, almost bureaucratic infrastructure. He saw schematics of ships, logistical routes, and, surprisingly, records of mundane supply requisitions. "The conduits for Cathar's Ravager," Genevieve murmured, pointing to a swirling diagram on the crystal's surface. "They are not mass-produced like standard Kaolin power cells. The data suggests a bespoke origin, highly specialized." Julian leaned closer, tracing a glowing line with his finger. "Specialized means rare. Rare means a bottleneck. Every empire has a weak point in its supply chain, no matter how powerful." His experience with Earth logistics, even on a small scale, offered a unique perspective. Genevieve nodded, her eyes fixed on the data stream. "Precisely. The Kaolin prioritize efficiency but also secrecy for critical assets. This conduit information is deeply encrypted, buried under layers of false leads. She shifted a holographic panel, revealing a complex Kaelin script. It speaks of the forging heart and the eternal fire. Sounds like poetry for a furnace, Julian observed, or a volcano, something that creates extreme heat. He remembered learning about Earth's unique geological processes in school. Genevieve paused, her gaze meeting his. Your understanding of natural phenomena is often illuminating. Kaelin technology often mimics planetary forces, but on a grander scale. She focused, her brow furrowing. This encryption is unlike anything else in the crystal. It's almost biological in its complexity. It shifts. Julian thought for a moment. What if it's not a static code? What if it responds to something? A sequence, a vibration, a specific energy signature. He recalled how some Earth-based security systems reacted to biometric input. Genevieve's eyes widened. A resonant frequency. You are right. The Kaelin often incorporate natural energy signatures into their most secure protocols. I must cross-reference this with known Kaelin elemental data. She began a rapid sequence of commands, the crystal's glow intensifying. Hours passed in concentrated silence, broken only by the soft clicks of Genevieve's work and Julian's occasional comments. He brought her tea, making sure she ate, a silent anchor in her intense intellectual storm. His presence, his quiet support, was a comfort she hadn't known she needed. Suddenly, a new holographic projection bloomed from the crystal. It wasn't a schematic but a celestial map. A small, desolate moon, perpetually wreathed in volcanic plumes and molten rivers, rotated slowly. Its name shimmered in Kaelin script, Ethelgard. Ethelgard, Genevieve pronounced, her voice filled with revelation. It is a volcanic moon in the Kaelin-controlled system of Zalara, not a homeworld but a resource hub. The forging heart is literal. This moon is a crucible. Julian stared at the image. So Cathar's special conduits come from there. He saw the scale of the Kaelin operations, a vast network extending far beyond Earth. Yes, Genevieve confirmed, pulling up detailed geological scans of Ethelgard. The moon possesses an extremely rare mineral, etherium, which, when subjected to intense volcanic heat and then rapid cooling, forms a crystalline structure capable of channeling unimaginable energy. These are Cathar's conduits. The data showed a massive Kaelin mining and processing facility burrowed deep within Ethelgard's volcanic crust. Automated drills bored into the molten core, extracting the raw etherium. Transport ships, heavily armored, waited in orbital docks to ferry the refined conduits directly to the Ravager. A direct assault on Ethelgard is impossible, Julian stated, his gaze sweeping over the defenses. It's a fortress, designed to protect their most vital resource. Agreed, Genevieve said, her voice grim, but the data indicates vulnerabilities in their transport protocols. The Kaelin are meticulous, but also predictable in their efficiency. They rely on established routes, scheduled transfers, and a belief in their own overwhelming power. Julian's mind began to churn, his experience with Earth's supply chains offering a glimmer of hope. If we can't hit the source, we hit the flow. Where do these conduits go after Ethelgard before they reach Cathar's flagship? Genevieve manipulated the hologram, showing a series of waypoints, transit stations, and temporary storage depots scattered across several star systems. They are routed through a central processing station designated Nexus 7, for final calibration before being delivered to the Ravager. Nexus 7, Julian repeated, a plan forming. A single point where all Cathar's special conduits converge. That's our target. He looked at Genevieve, a fierce determination in his eyes. We need to disrupt Nexus 7. Not destroy it, just throw their entire supply into chaos. Delay Cathar's operations. Genevieve studied the projections, then Julian's face. His human ingenuity, His ability to find a practical solution in the face of impossible odds was a constant source of wonder to her. Disrupting Nexus 7 would require precise timing and knowledge of Kaelan security protocols. The station itself is heavily defended. But the crystal has their protocols, right? Julian pressed. Their schedules, their weaknesses. We just need to find the right leverage point. A small, critical component that, if disabled or reprogrammed, could cause a cascade failure without attracting immediate, full-scale retaliation. Genevieve smiled, a rare, genuine expression that warmed the cabin more than the crackling fire. Your logic is elegantly brutal. The Kaelan prioritize their overall mission above all else. A minor, logistical disruption might not trigger a full alert, but it would cripple Cathar's immediate plans. She pulled up a detailed schematic of Nexus 7. There is a primary energy distribution hub within Nexus 7. It is responsible for channeling the Etherium conduits to their designated ships. If that hub were to experience a malfunction. Julian nodded, a shared understanding passing between them. It would starve Cathar's flagship of its unique power source, at least for a critical period. Enough time to shift the balance, maybe even send him into disarray. The vastness of the Kaelan Empire still loomed, but the specific, actionable target of Nexus 7 felt tangible. They had moved beyond simply defending their cabin. They were now strategists, charting a course to strike at the heart of their enemy's power. Julian felt a surge of purpose, a deep satisfaction in their shared endeavor. They had found their path, a precise, intelligent strike against an overwhelming force. Genevieve positioned the Kaelan communication device on the rough-hewn table. Its sleek, dark form contrasted sharply with the warm cabin interior. Julian observed her precise movements, every gesture indicating deep focus. The glowing crystal pulsed beside it, a silent, powerful conduit of stolen knowledge. The data identifies a maintenance access port, rarely used within Nexus 7's energy distribution hub, Genevieve explained, her voice low. It requires a specific sequence of encrypted frequencies to open, then a data packet designed to recalibrate the flow regulators. Julian leaned closer, studying the holographic schematics projected from the crystal. So, we're not blowing anything up. We're just telling it to reroute power inefficiently, creating a bottleneck. Precisely, Genevieve confirmed. A cascade of minor errors. The system will attempt to compensate, but its self-correction protocols will be overwhelmed, leading to a critical power degradation for the specialized conduits. Cathar's Ravager will suffer. Julian nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over him. It was an elegant solution, born from desperation and ingenuity. Can this beacon send that kind of signal? It's meant for communication, not system manipulation. With modification, Genevieve replied, her eyes scanning the device. The Kaelan designed their components for versatility. The core emitter can be repurposed, but it will require manual adjustments, and once activated, it will broadcast a unique signature. We will be exposed. We're already exposed, Julian countered, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. We either do this or we wait for them to find us. This way, we fight back. He moved to his workbench, retrieving a set of delicate tools. What do you need? Genevieve described the necessary modifications, her alien biological understanding blending with Julian's practical engineering skills. He worked with a meticulous focus, his hands steady as he adapted the device's internal components. Wires were rerouted. A small frequency modulator from an old radio was integrated, its purpose twisted to serve a new, destructive end. The air in the cabin grew thick with anticipation. The Kaelan network is vast, Genevieve murmured, watching his work. Even with the access port, we must ensure our packet is indistinguishable from a legitimate system command. Any deviation will trigger immediate shutdown and tracing. We have the crystal, Julian reminded her, his gaze unwavering. We have their language, we just need to speak it perfectly. He finished the last connection, a tiny spark briefly illuminating his face. "It's ready." Genevieve activated the modified beacon. A low thrum vibrated through the room, unlike any sound Julian had heard from it before. The crystal's glow intensified, projecting the complex data packet they had crafted, a subtle poison in the heart of the Kalen system. "Now we find the window," Genevieve stated, her fingers dancing over the beacon's interface, guided by the crystal's real-time Kalen network feed. Kalen Security patrols Nexus 7's data streams in staggered intervals. There is a 5-second gap every cycle when the primary monitoring system refreshes its buffers. That is our moment. Julian watched the countdown on the holographic display, his heart pounding in rhythm with the beacon's pulse. 5 seconds. It felt impossibly short. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. 3, Genevieve whispered, her eyes locked on the display. 2, 1, now. She plunged her hand down, hitting the activation sequence. A brilliant flash erupted from the beacon, a silent scream of data hurled across interstellar distances. For a moment, the cabin was awash in the light of their desperate gamble. Then silence, the beacon powered down, the crystal's glow subsided. Julian held his breath. Did it go through? Genevieve stared at the now dark beacon, her expression unreadable. The network registered an injection. The data packet was accepted. A faint tremor ran through her, but it also registered an anomaly, a ghost signal, too brief to trace but present. Julian felt a surge of adrenaline, a mix of triumph and dread. They know something happened. They know something tried to happen, Genevieve corrected, turning to him. Their automated systems will initiate a system-wide scan, but the disruption is subtle. It will take time to manifest, and longer still for them to pinpoint the source or the nature of the attack. A flicker of light on the crystal projection showed a distant, almost imperceptible shift in Kalen network activity, a slight increase in diagnostic queries, a subtle reprioritization of data packets. It was the digital equivalent of a ship groaning under strain. "We bought ourselves time," Julian said, a weary but resolute smile on his face. "And we hit them where it hurts." He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing the faint lines on her skin. Her touch was a grounding presence, a reminder of everything they were fighting for. Genevieve met his gaze, her yellow eyes reflecting a newfound hope. The Ravager's unique power conduits will begin to fail. Cathar will be crippled, at least for a critical period. Her voice was soft, but carried the weight of a monumental victory. "We have struck the first blow." The cabin felt different now, no longer just a refuge, but a crucible where courage had been forged into a weapon. They had taken a monumental risk, and the universe had, for a fleeting moment, allowed them to succeed. The fight was far from over, but the impossible had just become possible. A warmth spread through Julian, not just from the fire, but from the powerful, silent understanding that passed between them. They had dared to challenge an empire, and they had just shown the Kalen that even a whisper could become a roar. The consequences would come, but for now, they had hope. The crystal projection pulsed with diagnostic queries, a frantic, almost invisible surge of data across the Kalen network. Julian watched Genevieve's face, etched with a tension that mirrored his own. Her yellow eyes scanned the intricate web of light, searching for any sign of their gamble's success or failure. "They are running full system diagnostics," Genevieve confirmed, her voice a low murmur. "The anomaly has triggered an alert, but they do not understand its nature." Days bled into a watchful vigil. The subtle shifts on the crystal became more pronounced. First, isolated energy fluctuations on Ethelgard, the volcanic moon, then sporadic disruptions in conduit manufacturing. The Kalen network, a vast, complex entity, began to show cracks. "The primary energy distribution hub at Nexus 7 is experiencing intermittent failures," Genevieve announced one morning, her voice laced with triumph. A holographic diagram of Nexus 7 flickered, showing sections dimming then reigniting like a failing circuit. Our data packet is propagating. It's a slow burn, but it is working. Julian felt a profound release of breath. Cathar's Ravager will be next. Weeks passed. The Kalen network, once a seamless, terrifying entity, became a fractured maze of struggling systems. Intercepted Kalen communications, now more frequent and desperate, confirmed their hopes. The Ravager, Cathar's flagship, reported critical power conduit failures, rendering its hyperjump drives unstable. The Kalen Empire's expansion stalled. Commands became chaotic, supply lines faltered. The tide had turned. "They are recalling their advanced fleets," Genevieve stated, a profound weariness in her voice, but also a deep satisfaction. She pointed to a section of the crystal displaying a map of the known Kalen territories. Cathar is being forced to consolidate. Earth is no longer a primary target, not for now. Julian wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "What about the Kalen still here?" Genevieve closed her eyes, a faint ripple passing through her. "They are lost, disoriented. Their command structure is broken. They will not pursue. They are already seeking a way off-world, not to hunt but to survive." True to her word, the faint signals from the stranded Kalen diminished, then vanished entirely. Julian and Genevieve ventured out, finding only abandoned equipment and traces of makeshift shelters. The forest reclaimed its silence, the only remaining evidence of the interstellar invaders being a faint scorch mark where their ship had landed, now covered by new snow. Life in the cabin settled into a rhythm of peace. The crystal, its mission accomplished, now served as a silent reminder of their shared struggle and victory. Genevieve, no longer burdened by the immediate threat, found moments of profound tranquility. She spent hours by the window, watching the snow fall, her senses attuned to the subtle shifts of the wilderness. Julian often found her tracing patterns on the frosted glass, a smile playing on her lips. One evening by the fire, Julian watched her. Her alien beauty, once a source of apprehension, was now simply a part of her, intertwined with her strength and warmth. Her yellow eyes, once filled with terror, now held a deep, quiet affection. "Genevieve," he began, his voice soft, "we did it. Earth is safe for now. What now for us?" She turned to him, a flicker of vulnerability in her gaze. "My home is gone, Julian. Veridian Prime is dust. This world, your world, has become my sanctuary. With you." She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his, a comforting weight. "I have found a new purpose, a new connection here." Julian tightened his grip, a warmth spreading through him that had nothing to do with the fire. "Good, because I cannot imagine a life without you anymore. You are not just a refugee, Genevieve. You are my partner, my equal. You saved this world as much as I helped save you." A soft laugh escaped her, a sound like wind chimes. An unexpected alliance indeed, a human and a werewolf girl, as you once called me. More than that, Julian corrected gently, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "My love, my life." He saw the unspoken question in her eyes, the lingering fear of the unknown future. "We will build something new here, a life together. We will watch the seasons change, and if the Kalen ever return, we will be ready. Together." Genevieve leaned her head against his shoulder, her scent of pine and something uniquely alien filling his senses. "I would like that, Julian, a life. With you." Her voice was a whisper, full of trust and hope. The cabin, once a solitary refuge, now pulsed with a quiet, powerful energy. Outside, the forest was still, the only sound the gentle fall of snow. Inside, two souls from different worlds had forged an unbreakable bond. They had faced an empire and won, not with weapons and fleets, but with ingenuity, courage, and a love that defied all expectations. The universe was vast, full of wonders and dangers, but for Julian and Genevieve, their small cabin, nestled deep in the snowy woods, was home. Their journey had ended, not with a conquest, but with a quiet, profound beginning, a testament to the enduring power of connection across the stars.